What is going on, guys? It's Peter Jennings. I go by CSU Ram 88 across the daily fantasy industry, and I am back doing a lineup review on FantasyLabs.com. Going to be taking a look at week one of NFL and decided to do a review of a double up here. Just a 250 double up. I was fortunate to have some overlay, 181 of 225. 250 to 500, so really good spot here where everyone's making money overall, and even if you were slightly below average in this field, you still were able to cash. So we're taking a look at my top lineup within this double up, and I'll also look at Max Dollery's lineup, who had the highest score in this double up and is obviously one of, if not the best players in the industry. So taking a look at my lineup, I went with Sam Bradford at quarterback, who I thought was a pretty chalky play. I loved him. I also liked Matt Ryan and was a big fan of Tyrod Taylor. I just had Tyrod Taylor exposure across the rest of the industry. So I went with Sam Bradford quite a bit on DraftKings. I thought he was going to have a big game. I was also very bullish on Matt Ryan on DraftKings just because of the 300-yard bonus for throwing, which is what kind of boosted them in my ranks ahead of Tyrod Taylor, and the fact that I didn't want to be all in on one quarterback across all of my action across the industry. So I have Sam Bradford at quarterback. I have Chris Ivory at running back, who was very chalky, I thought. Going up against Cleveland, not very good against the run, very cheap, and clearly the guy who's going to get the bulk of the touchdowns. Very close to the rushing bonus, and actually did get a catch, which was nice. Eddie Lacy, also a very chalk play. Was hoping for a little bit bigger game. I thought 17 points, 18 points was kind of right around, his projection, but I was hoping for a little bit more. Almost got to the 100-yard rush mark as well. Did have a couple catches, which was nice, including a great one-handed catch, and he was just a chalk play. I mean, you wanted Green Bay exposure versus the Chicago defense, and as you can tell, 55% owned. He was a very popular play. Davante Adams at receiver, 82% owned. He was the number one chalk play on the slate. Did underperform. If you faded him in tournaments, kudos to you. I used him almost exclusively 100% in cash games and tried to fade him in tournaments just because I knew he'd be so heavily owned. That worked out. Unfortunately, the rest of my picks did not work out in tournaments relative to cash games where I was fortunate to have some success. Stevie Johnson I thought was another really chalk play. Only 16% owned here. Thought it'd be a little bit higher, but 3,700. He was with a lot of other receivers who are pretty cheap that were great plays. Going against Detroit, my thought was San Diego would have to throw a lot, which they did because they wouldn't be able to establish the run, and Stevie Johnson obviously is going to be a big part of that. Julio Jones, I mean, this is another no-brainer. I was fortunate to play Julio over some of the other stud receivers who pretty much all busted. A.J. Green, Des Bryant, Odell Beckham, Demarcus Thomas. But Julio I thought was in the best spot by far of any of those guys, just going against Philadelphia, who plays at such a high pace indoors, and he's just so heavily involved. Tons of targets, 2 touchdowns, just looked like an absolute stud, worth every penny of that new contract. And, he was just a no-brainer play for me. Tight end, I went Martellus Bennett, and I went Martellus Bennett for basically the reason that I thought he was an elite red zone play, and I did think that Chicago would be playing from behind. Very fortunate to get a garbage time touchdown with Martellus Bennett, who was overall a pretty chalky play here at 40%, the most chalky tight end. And I think that made a lot of sense given the opportunity and the price tag associated with Martellus Bennett. In the flex, I took Demarco Murray. I took 3 running backs in most of my cash games here just because of the pricing. I thought there was more value in running back, especially with all the really good receivers, really expensive. Normally it's the other way around with tight ends and receivers because of PPR, but because of the pricing, I thought DeMarco made a ton of sense here. He was in the flex spot. Notice that I made sure to put my latest starting guy out of my running backs in the flex spot. The Dolphins D, I thought that was a great play. Kirk Cousins, he has a habit of turnovers. It's almost like he practices throwing interceptions and got a huge game out of the Dolphins. Almost every defense that was chalky went off. Panthers, Jets, Broncos, all those guys, all the teams that I were on went off. My duds really fell in the top-end receivers and some of these running backs like Doug Martin. So I think it's a pretty straightforward lineup. No one really low owned. My lowest owned guys are 16%. That's kind of my game. I'm going to have to really adjust in tournaments and try to figure out what's optimal. Certainly, some other guys have had a lot more success than me recently in tournament, and they are doing things a lot differently than me. They're being more contrarian. My bread and butter is still the cash game. Still feel very comfortable there, and I think this lineup was a good lineup for a cash game. Let's take a look real quick at Max's team. I thought he had a very interesting team. First thing I'm going to point out is he did not put Demarco Murray in the flex, which is a mistake, the only mistake in the lineup. And I'm not one to criticize Max. He is the best player in the industry are right there. I'd say Max and Ray Hope, two of the top guys overall in the industry. And Max is just an incredible player. So I'm not trying to be critical, but he would even admit he's a great guy. He would even admit that he should have DeMarco Murray in the flex. It doesn't really matter too much in cash games, but just something to be cognizant of. But rest of the lineup I thought was amazing. Some guys that I had as well. I won't talk about those. Eddie Lacy, DeMarco Murray, Adams, Julio Jones, all those guys in my lineup. But he did go with Carson Palmer, which I thought was really interesting. I played him in the King of Miami, the King of the Beach, whatever tournament that was. I loved Carson Palmer this week at home, got the 300-yard bonus, and he did look really, really good. I think he's going to be an elite play all year long, and I think that it was a smart play here by Max. He also went with Davante Adams. We talked about him, but he paired John Brown with Carson Palmer, which I thought was a great play. Great price tag on Brown, elite upside, and with Malcolm Floyd just kind of being beat up, I thought that was a good play there, and certainly someone I have a lot of exposure to this week, and someone I'm going to be playing a lot going forward. Most interesting pick to me was Ameer Abdullah. I was a little hesitant about him with Drake Bell, but I think Max just really looked at the talent of Ameer and the price tag. I thought this was a great play. We both play college football pretty heavy, and Ameer Abdullah, if you watched any of him last year, he's an elite talent. And in the preseason, we can already see that. So great play there by Max, and he did pay off there with that price tag. Also went Jason Witten at tight end, which is very interesting, and what an end of the game there for Max with Jason Witten. So kudos to him. Great lineup here. Very interesting double up. Hope we have a little more overlay opportunities throughout the year, because they're definitely worth taking advantage of. Also wanted to give a shout out. We had someone at FantasyLabs with a score that would have won the Millionaire Maker, but did not have the lineup in there. So unfortunately, not taking home $2 million, but shout out on the great lineup there. Please give any feedback that you have. I'm going to try to get these out on Tuesdays. The schedule's been very tough for me to keep to, just because I have not been home at all over the last month and a half. And now I should be home for a little while. So please give me any feedback. I'll try to have these out on Tuesday. And if there's something specific that you would like me to review, hit me up on Twitter, or hit Fantasy Labs up on Twitter, and I will get to that. Good luck in all your contests, and hope to see more Fantasy Labs players up at the top of leaderboards.